Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. This is Beatrice speaking from UNEP. We would wait for 1 or 2 more minutes to start our webinar today, just to make sure that everybody is joining us. We had many participants that subscribed to the webinar today, so we'll give just 1 or 2 more minutes for them to join us. Okay, let's start then, and then people will slowly catch up. We start with the presentations. So again, my name is Beatrice. I'd like to welcome the participants to our webinar today, in which we are going to talk about longer lifetime for products, a compelling case towards circularity. This training material was developed thanks to the support of the French Minister of Ecological and Solidarity Transition, in partnership with the One Planet Network Consumer Information Program, and it was led by UNEP. Today I will be your moderator. So my name is Beatrice. For those of you who doesn't know me, I am the program management officer here at UNEP. I work at the consumption and production unit, and I lead the work on consumer information and eco-labeling. The person that is going to give this training is our consultant, Fernanda. Fernanda is a consultant for UNEP, providing support on topics related to sustainable consumption and production and corporate engagement. She is a PhD researcher with experience in the field of environmental policy and development, and she will be our trainer today. Just for you we will make this session as interactive as possible. So we will be asking you to log into Slido. The address is on your screen now, and enter the event code, which is hashtag 4587. So Slido is an audience interaction platform. Participants will be asked to respond to some questions during the presentation. You can either open Slido on another tab in your computer or access the platform on your cell phone if you want. So you can log in now, but you won't see the questions. They will appear in due time later on during the training session. Some house rules. So you are having the opportunity to be trained on product lifetime extension. So please close your emails and other browsers just to focus and enjoy this opportunity. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to write them on the chat box, and I will be monitoring those questions and sending to Fernanda for her to reply to the questions throughout the presentation. So now I'll give the floor to Fernanda for us to start our training.
So thank you very much, Beatrice, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. I'm super happy to be here with you today, speaking about this super relevant topic, and it's very, very good to see we had a great turnout. So today we have 4 main learning objectives that I'll be presenting now. So by staying with us for the next hour or so, you will first learn about product lifetime extension as a strategy in overall promotion of circular economy. You will learn what is the optimal replacement moment for products, understand how different actors can contribute to this strategy, and finally, some ideas on how each of these players, industry, governments, consumers, and NGOs, can put these strategies of extending the lifetime of products in practice. So before we dive into what a circular economy is, it is important to make sure we all here understand what a linear economy is. And essentially, a linear economy is a traditional way of production and consumption, where an economic activity follows a linear process, as you can see from this picture. So the resources are extracted, used, and then disposed back to the environment. So from this model, we can see actually that the environment acts as both the input to the economic process, as natural resources, of course, function as raw materials in the beginning of the process, and also as a sink to absorb the emissions and the waste at the end of the process. This is basically what we call a take, make, dispose economy. So now it comes the question, why is it important to extend the lifetime of products, or why should we make our products last longer? And this is the question that we are trying to address today in this training. Of course, a major reason is that the linear economic model is reaching its physical and environmental limits. We basically want to have space to absorb more and more waste. And also the fact that every time we throw away a product, for example, cell phones, which you can see in this picture, we essentially are also losing not only, of course, the product, but also all the energy and resources that went into its production. And while I'm speaking here, you are looking at this picture, and I think now it's possible to recognize, right? These are cell phones that were thrown away. And just to give you some statistics, the European Environment Bureau estimates that more than 7 billion smartphones were produced since 2007, basically 12 years ago, which means that we will have more cell phones produced than people in the planet. It's crazy. So for now, it should be clear that the growing consumption production creates pressure on natural resources on the one hand, and also generates a massive amount of waste. And therefore, this situation demands that we seriously explore options for circular economy, where basically the value of products is maintained for as long as possible, which means that extending their useful lives is an important strategy towards a circular economy. So here you can see a very simple diagram, but it's very useful to represent what we call a circular economy. This might be basic for some of you, but we thought it would be interesting to start this training by giving you some very basic definitions. Circular economy is basically where we not only use the product, but we have the opportunity to reuse, repair, remake, recycle, and therefore we can continue looping the looping of the product use as much as possible, instead of creating more and more waste. And this is as opposed to the linear model that we saw a few slides ago. This concept of circular economy is recognized in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, what we call the SDGs. I'm pretty sure we all have heard about that, which has the promotion of sustainable consumption and production at its core in SDG consumption and production. So just to ensure that everybody here is at the same page in terms of definitions, these are very important concepts that we should take into account in this topic. So first, as I already said, circular economy takes place when the value of product is maintained for as long as possible. Product lifetime is basically the period that starts when a product is released for use, and it ends at the moment a product becomes obsolete. And product lifetime extension is the deliberate strategy of postponement or reversal of the obsolescence of a product. And finally, planned obsolescence, which I'm pretty sure most of you here have heard a lot already. It is the deliberate action by producers to shorten a product's lifetime in order to increase its replacement rate. In some countries, such as France, this is already recognized as a legal practice, but we are going to discuss that in a few minutes. In this sense, product lifetime extension is presented here as a win-win situation for the environment, the economy, and the society. So essentially, the environment is benefited through reduction of waste and resources saving. The economy gains from cost saving for businesses, which can also, of course, gain opportunity for innovating their practices. And the society is benefited through getting better value for money and also being better informed on what they buy. So the whole rationale behind this presentation today, and perhaps one of the most important takeaways that we expect you to take from this training, is that a longer lifetime for products, like the overarching concept of circular economy, of course, has the potential to generate new economic activities, to offer societal and environmental benefits, and at the same time prompting or generating innovation in existing business models. So just to give you a concrete example, product lifetime extension can also offer substantial carbon savings. This is the result of a very interesting study developed by the Green Alliance from the UK, which demonstrates the role households could play reducing overall carbon footprint from the country. So basically, researchers modeled potential carbon savings that would result from implementing some specific measures on the consumption production. And they considered specifically 5 common household goods that are responsible for high carbon emissions in the country, which are packaging, clothing, vehicles, appliances, and furniture. So basically what they found is that by improving product design and lifetimes, they could offer the greatest potential savings of the strategies investigated. So if you are interested in understanding more of the results of this study, it is available online, and we are going to share the link with you later. So how do we know if products should be replaced or repaired? I mean, if it's better for the environment, we buy a new product or repair the old one that we have. This is actually not an easy question. There are some guidance available to help us with that. And in these next few minutes, I'm just going to talk more about this with you. So from an environmental perspective, an optimal replacement moment is the point in time where the environmental impacts that arise from using a product equal the embedded impacts of a replacement product, so that minimal environmental impact is generated in total. For those of you who are not really familiar with this concept, the moment is usually calculated through a review of life cycle assessment studies, what we call LCAs. So basically, an LCA allows us to assess the whole environmental impact of a product through its life cycle stages, which usually includes the extraction of the material, the production, the transport, the use, and then the disposal. So what LCA studies do in this context is that they can compare scenarios of different product lifetimes, and based on their quantitative impacts, they can identify the optimal replacement moment for products. But the fact is that it's very important to consider that the optimal replacement moment will vary considerably with varying use and use context. So just to give you an example, for instance, in China, manual laundry washing is super common still in households that own a washing machine. So people have washing machine, but it's very common that they still wash their clothes manually. And therefore, Chinese households consume less water with washing machines because of the low number of wash cycles. In Japan, for example, Japanese households commonly use cold water washing machines. But when it comes to Europe, European households usually perceive hot water as more hygienic. So usually they load the washing machines with hot water, which of course consume large amounts of electricity compared to the cold water type. And actually, it can be even more complex than that because the washing operations can also vary depending on the dwelling size, the work patterns of the dwellers, the sources of electricity generation that are used in the place, and also the perception of cleanliness, for example. Even if you consider, for example, the types of garments or how garments are placed in a machine and how they mix during the cleaning process. So basically all of these results in a large degree of variability in the washing performance, and thereby can influence the environmental impact of the use phase. So this is basically to give you some examples and understanding that pinpointing a precise replacement moment is very difficult for products because we do have to take into account that the context used can vary a lot between countries and societies. But anyway, it's still super important that we understand this concept and to think about that, especially because we have to understand there are some different categories of products. So from a product lifetime and environmental perspective, products can be divided into three main categories. The first one would be what we call the disposable products with an intrinsically short life. And in this category, we would see, for instance, fast-moving consumer goods, toilet paper, or food packaging. And lifetime extension does not seem very realistic for this product category. And so there might be other solutions for this category of products, for example, recycle and other solutions that we can find. The second category require no or minimal consumption of water, electricity, or, for example, detergents during use. And these are, for example, furniture or non-electric tools. And for this category of products, product lifetime extension should always be considered. And this is because, of course, the biggest environmental impact of a sofa, for example, or of a table, comes from the production or disposal phases and not really the use phase. That's why we are now focusing on the resource-intensive products during use. For example, as I said before, an example of the washing machine, but also televisions, freezers, laptops, cell phones, and others. And this category is basically the category that we'll be focusing on today because that's exactly where we should discuss when these products should be replaced for more energy efficient products or when should they be repaired. Basically, what is their optimal replacement moment? So this training, as I said, will focus on these categories of products, which are resource-intensive products during use. And actually now, we just want to make it more interactive. And then I'll just hand over to Beatrice to moderate the interaction with you.
Okay, thank you, Fernanda. So now it's your turn to answer some questions, and we will calibrate how is the perception around our participants around this topic. So there is no right and wrong answers. What we wanted with this short interactive session is just to know more or less what's your opinion about those topics. So please go to Slido and enter the event code, which is 4587. And please answer this question that is on your screen right now. We'll give you some seconds to answer the question, and then we will go back to Fernanda to discuss what we have just talked about. So Fernanda, I think we already have some answers, and so can you please go back and give your ideas about this topic?
So thank you very much for those of you who participated. This is, as Beatrice said, just a fun activity for us to get your insights. And then there is no right or wrong answer, but this is basically just an entry point for us to have some reflections on these specific products. So what we can see actually from washing machines is that in the literature, washing machines are considered as a workhorse product, which means that we just typically buy a washing machine for a lifetime of heavy and prolonged use, and we don't really buy a new one if we like it, but we only replace when they break down completely or cannot be repaired at a reasonable cost. The fact is that washing machines are very use-intensive products that consume, as you know, energy, water, and detergents. And the use phase contributes the most to the overall environmental impact of washing machines. There are some research actually that shows that 65 to 80% of the impact of washing machines come from the use comes from the use phase, and of course this depends on the environment indicator used. That's why there is this range between 65 and 80. But based on existing LCA studies, we see that they should be at least 10 years old before replacement. And the fact with washing machines, which is very interesting, we already talked about that before the beginning of the presentation, is that consumer use has a significant role to play in the environmental impact of washing machines, which of course varies greatly across regions and cultural contexts. So what could be done, for example, in regards to this category of products? We could try to develop more LCA studies that include a range of use patterns to give consumers more information, and these of course would be a contribution from the academia perspective. But we could also promote sustainable use practices to help decrease this environmental impact of clothes washing. So, for example, using cold water. And this could be something that both governments or both NGOs could have a campaign on. Again,
okay. Now again, it's your turn again. So please go back to Slido and ask and answer the next question. This question would be if you have a LED TV that has just broken and is 3 years old, what would you do? So I would buy UHD or smart televisions, which seem to be more energy efficient than other models. I would buy whatever I like the most because the model and the size of the TV do not matter. What matters is how much I use it, or I would try to repair it. So what would you do in case your LED TV just broken and it's 3 years old? So I am seeing that we are having the responses. We are quicker this time, so let's give a few seconds more and then we go back to Fernanda. So Fernanda, it's with you. Can you come back and please comment on the topic of the TVs?
Yeah, sure. Thank actually, because what we can see is that's contrary to expectations. The case on smart televisions show that new technology developments do not necessarily lead to energy savings. And this means, of course, that the product replacement could undo energy savings, which were made in the past, especially when LED TVs came into the market. And this is basically because when we use smart or internet connected capabilities or features in the new television models, this adds energy consumption, for instance, when the TV is streaming content and also browsing the internet. Also with these kind of trends towards 4K models, with usually of a higher resolution and also larger screens. Everybody nowadays has a very big, large screen at home. These, of course, push the energy use of TVs upwards. Just to give you another statistic as example, so there is a study that indicates that ultra high definition televisions use 30% more energy than HD models of the same size. Of course, again, in terms of what could be done, user behavior is super important, because if we think of the display modes or the screen brightness or the feature selections and even the room lighting, all of these can affect energy use. So user behavior is more important than ever when it comes to televisions. Finally, let's go to the last one.
Yes, finally, this is our last question for you today. Please turn back to Slido and ask the next question, which is, if your vacuum cleaner has just broken, when should you replace it with a new one? So what is the optimal momentum for replacing a vacuum cleaner? If it is 2 years old, if it is 5 years old, or I would never replace it and always try to repair. So what would you do? So as Fernanda explained already, it's really hard to define the optimal momentum for replacing those products, but we have some studies that will give you some hints. Back to you, Fernanda, you can comment on this.
Cleaners. This is actually a very interesting product category, because for Europeans, there is actually a European Eco-Design Directive for vacuum cleaners, which does contain several requirements on energy consumption and durability. I don't know if the European present here know about that, but yes, there is. And in spite of these minimal durability criteria in the Eco-Design Directive, there might be other factors that stimulate rapid replacement of vacuum cleaners, because as you can see here in the slide, they are very often replaced before they are 5 years old, which is the expected lifespan in this directive. And the fact is that according to some studies and research and surveys with consumers, the problem is that consumers appear to be reluctant to perform maintenance and repair activities, so they just prefer to buy a new cheaper model of vacuum cleaners. So what could be done with these product category could be pay attention to consumer education, trying to really educate them and for them to try and perform maintenance and repair so their products can last longer. It stimulates better product design in terms of it should be easier to clean and to repair. And of course, ensure that the producers make repair easier and increase availability of spare parts for consumers to be able to repair their products. So thank you very much for you all for having participated in this quick survey. And although, as I said in the beginning, it's very hard to generalize, what we tried with this slide is just to summarize the data collected in the most literature available in the topic. So basically, for example, washing machines and freezers should be used for at least 10 years before they should be replaced with a more energy efficiency model. Or televisions, as we already discussed, it makes sense to keep all the LED models in use instead of replacing them with newer or bigger or less energy efficient 4K models. And for vacuum cleaners, laptops, mobile phones, and clothing, they are usually replaced before their time and should be reused or used for longer. Although, as we already know from this training, that pinpointing exact replacement moment is very difficult, and it depends on the context and the culture as well. This table is just an overview of products and their average lifetime as reported in the literature, and this is an example from Europe. This is based on products' average expected lifetime. And what we can understand from this table actually is that all the data on average product lifetime is always presented in a stochastic way, in a sense that we just have an interval with a certain probability. It's very hard, of course, to pinpoint the average expected product lifetimes, but this is just for you to know there are some other sources available in the literature that discuss these more in depth. Okay, so basically simply pointing towards industry, designers as the instigators of planned obsolescence is really short-sighted. In other words, what we are trying to say here is that we should also try and seek for solutions that engage consumers, policymakers, industry, and also NGOs. So collaboration is really key in this topic of product lifetime extension. So policymakers, they have a very important role by more generically enabling conditions for companies and consumers to take action. Industry, they of course can offer durable products, provide better information on the lifetime of products, make repair easier and increase availability of spare parts. Consumers can translate their dissatisfaction with the lifetime of their products into meaningful action. And NGOs can monitor trends in product lifetimes and also work on consumer education and information. So now the idea is that we are going to go in depth into one of these four categories and also present and discuss some possible strategies that each of these actors or players how they could play a role in this agenda. So for policymakers, there are three main ideas that we want to put forward to begin with. So first, the idea that they should take into account that successive generations of electronic products are not always more energy efficient. The second idea is that the replaced products are not always taken out of circulation. So it's very important for them to be aware of that before designing their policy measures to tackle this topic. And also, as we already discussed, they should take into account the variation in use and use context across cultures. Okay, so in terms of legislation, France definitely takes the lead on the topic. In August 2015, the country became the first country in the world to define and outlaw the practice of planned obsolescence through the Code de la Consommation. And the law reads, I'll read in English here, but the law reads, planned obsolescence means the techniques by which a manufacturer aims to deliberately reduce the life of a product to increase its replacement rate, which is basically the same definition that we saw in the beginning of this presentation. And it goes forward because it says it's punishable by 2 years imprisonment and a fine of 300,000 euros. So France has also stressed the importance of having agreed European definition of planned obsolescence at the Environment Council. And the European Commission is now considering to follow France's example and to make planned obsolescence prohibited by law as well. One example that already happened is that there is a French nonprofit called HOP, H-O-P, and this nonprofit already brought legal suits against some 2 technology companies for breaking the planned obsolescence law. One of the benefits of such a law is, of course, that it can help raise awareness on product lifetimes for both consumers and producers. What we can see, however, looking at the broader policy framework around the world, is that the concept of a longer lifetime for products is currently not explicitly present in policies and regulations. And overall, the current policy framework does not provide sufficient mechanisms to guide or to regulate longer product lifetimes. So basically what's happening in France now with this law is an exception in the road. However, what we can see is that there is a wide regulatory framework for product design and life cycle issues. For example, initiatives that promote zero waste or eco-design or eco-innovation or eco-labeling, and these are the initiatives that I listed here. This could be broadened to explicitly support the extension of product lifetimes. So for instance, in Europe, we have both the Eco-Design Directive and the Energy Labeling Directive. And for the first one, the Eco-Design Directive, the current wording of this directive already does consider the topic somehow, because it addressed the topic of obsolescence in one of these annexes. So implementing measures imposing requirements to avoid this planned obsolescence would be possible under the umbrella of this existing Eco-Design Directive. Also, the same thing happened with the Energy Labeling Directive, because information on the planned life expectancy of products could be required under the EU Labeling Directive. This is just a very nice graph that illustrates how Eco-Design Directive and the Energy Labeling Directive have the potential to drive product lifetime extension strategies in the EU level. So basically, the Eco-Design Directive pushes wasteful products off the market, and as a complement, the Energy Labeling Directive pulls consumers towards better products. And you can, of course, read more about this complementarity and how this could address product lifetime extension at the link that we put below the slide. But also, we can see that what we call the soft policies, which are not necessarily imposed by legislation, but voluntary regulation, could also help. And one example is the work with type 1 eco-labels. That is an example of soft policy mechanisms that could help address product lifetime extension and support initiatives that provide information for consumers through labeling, for example. And this should certainly facilitate incorporating product lifetime into purchasing decisions, while also trying to tackle the challenge of providing better information to consumers. And one example of this is, again, another example from the EU, which is the EU Equilibrium Criteria on Repairability and Durability, which already has criteria addressing repairability, upgradability, and durability for some product categories. So basically textiles, footwear, and also computers, notebooks, and tablets. So these product groups are already addressing certain aspects of product lifetime extension under the EU Ecolabel. So when it comes to policy making, again, it's very important. We have seen, for example, these examples from the EU, but it's very important for policymakers to consider that policy intervention should be context specific. And of course, these difference between developed countries and developing countries, here the slide a very broad brush, but it's just for you to have an idea of broader trends and perspectives. So for example, for developed countries, what we can see overall is that product lifetime extension is not a widespread practice. And we can see a rapid replacement cycles and actually reluctance from the consumers also to engage in maintenance and repair activities, while in overall developing countries, we can see informal repair markets. They are usually more common, and although enforced legislation is often absent, product lifetime extension tends to occur more spontaneously. So again, it's very important to flag that the different policy perspectives are not one or the other solution, but different perspectives that policymakers could use and combine, depending on the context, should be considered. And we often see that a mixed or hybrid policy toolbox is more effective to tackle the problem with a shortened lifetime of products. The fact is that when it comes to policy measures, we can see that the different policy measures could tackle different causes of the problem. So for instance, if we consider that the cause of short-term lifetime of products is the lack of transparency between industry and consumers, then the policy measure should be able to offer consumers better information, and with that, they could make better buying and use decisions. So this is basically rationale for different policy measures. And if we consider, for instance, that the cause of shorter product lives is the lack of incentives from companies to develop durable and reusable products, then it will be necessary to enable and empower manufacturers to extend the lifetime of products and also give their customers a high quality product experience. And finally, another different perspective would be to see the lack of infrastructure, for example, the waste management, and also the marginalization of informal sector as the main cause of shorter product lives. And then this could be solved by the improvement of waste management infrastructure and also by recognizing the full potential of the informal sector. But as I said before, it's really important for policymakers to consider that shorter product lives is very often a result of a mix of these causes. So now I'm just giving very briefly some policy measures examples. So for instance, there are some policy measures that could help address the problem of lack of transparency and therefore the problem of shorter product lives, which are, for example, regulation against planned obsolescence, which is the case of France that we already saw today, minimum durability criteria, For example, that we already have also in Europe for vacuum cleaners. We already talked about that as well. Product lifetime labeling, which is basically the example of EU eco-label, extended product warranty, and also right to repair. So these are examples of policy measures that could take in place. If you address, for example, the lack of incentives from companies to develop durable products, some policy measures could be, for example, the extended producer responsibility, the removal of legal barriers for refurbishment remanufacturing, and also the stimulation of alternative business models. For the lack of infrastructure and the marginalization of informal sector, some policy measures that could be considered would be around, of course, the improvement of waste management infrastructure in the country or the region, the recognition of the full potential of the informal sector, and also consumers' education and information. I'm not going to go into detail in each of these policy measures, because the idea of this training today is to give you all just a broader idea of all the actors and players, and not only policymakers. But of course, there are certainly a very interesting next step in this idea of working on policymaking. Okay, but before we go to the industry, it's really important to consider that these three factors need to be established, and in order to ensure the effectiveness and implementation of the previously mentioned policy instruments. So consumers, NGOs, and business have to take action as well. We have to work also on the acceptance of alternative models by both consumers and industry. And we have to have in place monitoring, verification, and enforcement measures. Okay, so let's now go for industry. Basically, of course, as we already know, industry has a very, very important role to play when it comes to extending the product, the lifetime of our products. Again, three main ideas that industry should take into account when thinking about this topic is that first, many important decisions are taken in the product design phase. So it's really important that companies try to involve the designers of their products since the beginning. Also, the level of market maturity is decisive for more binding rules, creating a real level playing field in this agenda. And third, business strategies abound. So basically, there are many business strategies that could address product lifetime extension. And overall, these business strategies can fall into one of these three broad brush categories. So for instance, business strategies can resist obsolescence, which are strategies that aim to allow products to be used for a longer time. The second would be to postpone obsolescence. This should be done through services such as maintenance and upgrades. And third, reversing obsolescence through, for instance, recovering broken products. So these are just some three bigger categories in which business strategies could fall into. There are, as I said just before, several types of business strategies to address product lifetime extension, but for today training, we are just going to go into more detail into 5 of these strategies. This is not exhaustive, but it is a comprehensive approach to business strategies, as we can see from our work with companies as well. So we have refurbishment, secondhand market, upcycling, repair, and remanufacturing. Okay, so the first one, which I think is the most common for us when we think about extending the lifetime of our products, which is a second-hand market. They are goods at some stage of the production or distribution. They have entered into the possession of a person through an act of trade or through any act against payment or free of charge. So this is basically just the very formal definition. There are certainly several benefits to consumers, which comprise the availability of cheaper products, access to a wide range of products available on multiple platforms, the possibility to find rare products, and possibility to recover part of the initial investments they made in a new product. And benefits to companies, for example, the market expansion opportunity. So they could, for example, sell their products through websites, apps, stores, fairs, etc. And also the flexibility to operate in flourishing economic scenarios. Just for us to now ask, how can this strategy of second-hand market be applied in practice? There are, for instance, this case study, which comes from Brazil, from OLX. And basically what they do is that the initiative is an online market for second-hand products. So there is no charge on transactions between individuals, which of course contributes to lower product price. And this also encourages sellers and buyers to join the online platform. And one of the barriers that we still have is that consumers are pretty much still attached to their goods. So again, this is something that has to be addressed for this second-hand market to flourish as a strategy. So the second strategy is the upcycling, which is basically, you can see the definition there, but it's basically defined as any measure and activity in the design phase targeting at optimal handling of product as nutrients. Benefits to consumers could add value through design or new function, and of course obtain what we call one-of-a-kind items, because then consumers could purchase unique pieces. Benefits to companies, monetary savings, and also reduction of waste generation and treatment requirement. One very good example of this strategy of upcycling is by a company called Swan Design, which, so basically the initiative is to use non-organic waste that they found on the streets in Senegal, and they then produce furniture, fine design furniture, and they sell them in Germany. It's super interesting. And you can, for example, see some of their products are sold by Amazon, but it's almost always actually, they work with pieces on demand according to options available in the company portfolio. And when it doesn't happen, then they sold the remaining pieces in online platforms. Another strategy is repairing, which again, I think it's a very common strategy. It's basically to put something that is damaged back into good condition or make it work again. So there are several benefits to consumers, not only monetary saving, but also restore energy efficiency and keep the items working. Again, right? And benefits to companies, it could be market expansion opportunity. For example, companies could not only offer products, but also could offer services and also the replacement parts as a service for consumers. And also they could identify possible improvement points for future products if they are working with repairing. One success case when it comes to repairing comes again from Brazil, which is a cooperative named Geração Ecotrônicos, and they focus on repairing, conditioning, and recovering of electronic products. So basically, they analyze the product and then they evaluate what to do with it, according, of course, to a criteria that they established, and then they determine if it's possible to resell it with minimal repairs, if they should dismantled, or if it should be depersonalizing or sent for recycling. And yeah, so barriers, again, are the consumer's preference for new products, and sometimes the documentation process is another barrier that doesn't really allow the cooperative to perform its activities, because it always requires constant renewal and licensing, and this sometimes is a costly process, usually involving a number of professionals such as lawyers, administrators, accountants, and so on. So remanufacturing, to remanufacture is to return a used product to at least its original performance with a warranty that is equivalent to or better than that of a newly remanufactured product. So benefits to consumers, of course, security for being covered by the warranty with the supplier, and obtain products with similar or even better performance as new in a faster way, and also very often cheaper, right? And benefits to companies, they can provide customer fidelity, and also, as I said before in the other business strategy, it's an opportunity for market expansion, because they could not only offer products, but also services. And then a case study from Neptune Pumps, a company that was created in 1972 in Chile, and it's super famous now in Latin America, circular economy business sector. So basically, the company designed an innovative pump system focused on the efficient use of resources, which are usually wasted in industry. The barrier in this case is the competitiveness with large companies that Neptune Pumps should address. Okay, so what are the three key takeaways when we look at these case studies? So first, we see that extending product lifetime is more than extending time. Actually, when you look at some success business case studies that address this problem, we see that there is an embedded emotional and transformational meaning that goes beyond rational temporality and address a more symbolic dimension. So, for instance, some companies, especially, for example, in the secondhand market as a strategy, they see that the emotional dimension is very important. Sharing stories about the product is very important, and this could raise the product to a new place, a place that is more emotional and less disposable. The second takeaway would be the mindset change. This is essential for companies to opt for innovative business over traditional ones. And finally, the creation of new connections inside the value chain, including, for instance, the inclusion of vulnerable communities, and then how this could give another dimension, another story to their products. And these also should also change the logic of communications, involving the integration of these different causes, more aspirational, more ideological, with rational, emotional product benefits. This is basically just how we could compare or map the approach of the companies. So we can see that they vary from a spectrum between a more emotional approach, such as the Swan Design in Senegal, that sells products to Germany, to a more rational approach, such as Neptune pumps, which really provides a concrete cost benefit for the other businesses, and also in terms of client segment. Either they have a business-to-business approach or a final consumer approach. So this is basically to show that there are, of course, lots of possible business strategies, and they vary a lot between them. But usually, this is how we try to map the client segment and also the case approach of these business that try to expand the product lifetimes. Okay, now for
Fernanda,
of course, play a very important role. Basically, in three different times. So they could choose products from companies that address product lifetime extension, when they decide what to consume, and also how they use what they consume. What we can see here from this quote is that consumers' attitude in this topic can also be seen as a political act. This quote, when fixing items is actively discouraged by manufacturers, repair becomes a political act. This was said by Stuart Ward, a repair cafe volunteer based in the UK, during an interview to The Guardian. So basically, we can see that consumers are more and more involved in the topic of product lifetime extension. And we can also see from multiple surveys and research is that consumers do want durable and repairable goods. They want product last, and they would rather repair their goods than buy new ones, or they think business should be required to provide repair, maintenance, and disposal support. Overall, they do want their products to last longer. However, what we can see is that they still face barriers to choose durable goods and repair them. And amongst the most common barriers that consumers face comes the cost of repair, the quality of repair services, the access to spare parts or software updates, diagnostic or tools, the lack of updates on smartphones more specifically, and of course all the electronic products. And finally, information. For example, they don't really have access to diagrams or exploded views of products, which are that kind of drawing that shows how mechanical parts are assembled. So these are basically the main barriers that consumers nowadays face. Okay, so how consumers can be involved in product lifetime extension? Basically, in 4 different ways. So first of all, of course, taking good care of products, taking action such as repairing so that products can be used longer. They could, for instance, let go of the concept that reused, repaired, refurbished, they are inferior to new ones. And this is, of course, something that we respect of our role in society and professional lives. We could also help change consumption habits to value used products. So they are no longer seen as a poor alternative. And also participate in reverse logistics, returning products to producers after use. So this is just an example of how consumers are already putting pressure. So there was a vote at the Council of the European Union on measures affecting the repairability of various domestic appliances. And then there were some countries that were opposing these measures last year, and they were mainly Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom. And then consumers in these 3 countries basically got together And then they put forward a petition that approached more or less 200,000 signatures in total. So this is just to show you that actually consumer actions have been put in place in this topic. And also some good practices. So we have, for example, the recent trends of repair cafes, where volunteers teach people how to fix their own products. They usually do that in front of a customer in a cafe or something like that as a workshop. And this, for example, in the picture you can see from the Edinburgh Remakery workshop in Edinburgh. And also iFixit, which I think most of you already know because they've been very famous. Basically, it's an online community of people sharing repair know-how. The idea is that they could make repair easy for anyone and simple for people to fix their own devices. It's a really interesting platform. And for example, we have the smartphone repairability available there. And it's really nice because they actually rate the devices and give the devices a repairability score. And also they sell their spare time, their spare parts and tools, which is of course how they fund themselves, which is super interesting. So finally, the last player or the last actor in this field, the NGOs, which can of course take action by several types of measures. So for instance, they can share knowledge to enable groups around the world. They can collect and share open data, for example, on electronic repairs. They can gather with commercial repairs and other collecting repair data, and then disclosing this kind of data to consumers and to citizens. They can share stories about the positive impacts of product lifetime extension. They can, of course, inform advocacy, which is something very important when it comes to creating a level playing field in terms of legislation around the world. And finally, a very good example is they can encourage more people around the world to address this topic. So a good example is the annual International Day of Repair, organized by the Open Repair Alliance, which is an international group of organizations that works towards a world where electric products are more durable and easier to repair. So they want to make a stronger case for more easily repairable devices. And then they celebrate this repair day. And last year was on the 20th October. Not last, yeah, last year. So it's really interesting. And then they offer materials and information to individuals or community groups so they can share in their social media, and then they feel part of this initiative. Another example is the co-products, which is a coalition of European NGOs, and they work mainly in eco-design and also energy labeling. And also the Restart project, which helps people learn how to repair their broken electronics. And it's super interesting because they organize free community repair events, and they call it the parties. So where a volunteer can help people learn how to repair the broken or slow devices. And then they organize these free events for everybody. Okay, so last point that I would like to make today in terms of content is the importance that NGOs could also consider the use of social capital in this topic. There are some studies that already predict an increase in demand for low and medium skilled jobs related to policies aimed at longer lifetime for products. And these, therefore, should help us to value the tacit knowledge which is perceived as useful in daily life. So it should give people more confidence in their own ability to be self-supporting in this idea of having the products last longer. And also a very interesting point is that many of these activities that aim at having a longer lifetime for products, they do not require highly skilled professional workers, so they could also be done by the so-called transit workers or marginalized people. So there are actually some opportunities for us to link this topic of product lifetime extension to the better use of social capital. And this is something that definitely should be taken into account by NGOs or anyone working on this topic. Okay, so we are now approaching the end of this, at least my part here, this training session. And I just wanted to share with you that we actually have a whole bunch of knowledge products that we developed on this topic. So for instance, the long view report, which talks about policy measures to be taken to extend the useful life of products, and also a little bit of context on how to analyze the optimal replacement moment, as we discussed in the beginning of this training. So this is also available in this report, and also some infographics and all the case studies, some of them, of course, some of them that I just very, very briefly addressed today in this training, you can actually access them in detail and understand the context of the case studies, the business model, the barriers, and everything. Unfortunately, because of the time, we couldn't go into detail on that, but there are very nice stories and inspiring stories that you could just access. And this it's all available at what we call the Product Lifetime Extension Hub, which is at the One Planet Network website. You can see the address here. And the idea with this hub is actually to gather materials developed by other organizations. So if you are aware of any interesting material that we could include, please just reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to include these materials on the hub. So I think that's all from my side. Beatrice, I don't know if you want to reach out to any questions I received.
Yes, Fernanda, thank you very much. I'm just adding the address of the hub to the chat box so that everybody can have it there. So are we not okay? So if we're now open for questions. If anyone has one question, I have one that I just received, but I would like to first to open to the audience. I believe that you cannot speak, but you can type your questions in the chat box. So until we receive more questions from the audience, I will advance the one that I already received, Fernanda, is that if you could please tell us how you see that policy measures can actually help to those new business models to thrive.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So of course, yes, this is a very good question. Yes, policy measures are fundamental to help support these business strategies, especially when it comes to small businesses, because most of the cases that we collected and that you can see on the website, some of them I just very briefly addressed today, but most of them come from small companies or medium companies even, and most of them from developing countries. So, for example, as I said, in the case of one of the companies that work with repairing, they do have issues in terms of adjust the documentation that allows the cooperative to perform its activities. And this is a costly process. So this is something that certainly in a policy measure could help with trying to giving more opportunities or understanding that these business strategies require a different set of policy measures and not necessarily just the old traditional model of having a manufacturer selling their products. So the recognition, the formal recognition of these business strategies is something that policymakers can certainly help with.
Okay, thank you very much, Fernanda, for answering the questions. Another is that do we have plans? Do you have plans to roll this material out in the in countries to have some country work around product lifetime extension?
Yes, I mean in terms of training, right? Delivering this, yes. Yes, we certainly have this plan. We actually have the plan of delivering the training, especially in developing or emerging market countries. And also, as I think I said in the beginning, that we could also be interested in deepening this content to these certain categories of players. So for instance, policymakers, we could try and deliver training more specifically for them, and also industry, bringing about more case studies, but also deepening the case studies that we have it here.
Thank you, Fernanda, for making it clear.
Okay.
I think we have another question coming up.
Hi, this is Bettina speaking. I'm just going to read out some of the questions that we have coming up in the chat. So one question is on what is the difference between refurbishment and remanufacturing, please?
Okay, this is a very good question actually, because yeah, so I mean the business strategies that we collected when we say refurbishment, they could also be seen as remanufacturing, but then we have to just go through to the official definition. Perhaps I should just put there, right? Is it remanufacturing and repairing, right? Bettina,
it's remanufacturing and refurbishment.
Okay. So basically, remanufacturing is to return unused product to at least its original performance with the warranty that is equivalent to or better than that of the newly manufactured product. So it's at least the original performance. So this is the remanufacturing.
Great, thanks, Fernanda. Then the next one is whether there is a Latin American country with advanced policies so that people in the call can learn from what other Latin American countries are doing.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is actually not something that we are aware of in detail, so I would prefer not explaining or not giving a very specific example, and then missing another one that we might not be aware of. Beatriz, I don't know if you want to come in and explain more about the work that we are doing with some Latin America countries. Other than that, I would say that, as you could see, this is another thing that we should bring about. As you could see from the training material, we still miss data and information from many developing countries. Even, for example, if you have a look at the report that we produced, the laundry report, many data regarding product lifetime extension is still pretty much developed countries driven, especially when it comes to considering the results of LCA studies. So this is certainly an area that we could work more, and we would welcome any types of suggestions on how we could do that. Even if you have a look at the literature on LCA studies, they are pretty much focused on European context or developed countries context. This is certainly a very important area that we should move forward.
Thanks, Fernanda. Then the next one would be how do we help large businesses to adapt their revenue models, which have become very dependent on mass consumption and rapid inventory turnover? This ties directly to the ability of these companies to generate employment.
Absolutely. This is a very good question. And yes, actually, I don't have one answer only for this question, because this basically would require us to remodel the whole system and the way the production is made nowadays. But basically what we see is that there is actually an opportunity for also large companies, and they shouldn't see this topic, or even manufacturers, as a threat to their business models, but instead an opportunity for them, for example, to partner with NGOs, or to partner with smaller organizations that could then offer services to repair the products that these large companies sell. So there are certain opportunities for large manufacturers or large companies, and the idea here of this topic is that we should just see product lifetime extension not as a threat for the actual business model, but instead an opportunity for all of us to rethink the way we produce and then we consume. Yes, it's a very good question, actually, that will require us, so a very more concrete thought into that.
Thanks, Fernanda. And then a final question that we've received is, are there legally binding policies being discussed in the EU and the US to make the soft policy stronger?
In terms of the binding policies, one example definitely is the example from France against planned obsolescence. But I understood you saying about how to make soft policy stronger, right? So
yes, indeed.
I don't know if I got exactly what this person means, but yeah, sorry, I don't know. Yeah, the problem is that they can't speak, right? So they can really clarify.
Yeah, I think that maybe something around the lines that that there was this discussion to make extended warranty mandatory, or to have a minimum level of a minimum amount of lifespan for products, maybe something on these lines, I would say.
Okay. Yes. Now, in this case, we do have, for example, in the EU, there is an EU directive on consumer sales, for example, which basically say a minimum legal guarantee period for the reversal of the burden of proof for the defect of the product. And then, for example, France and Portugal have extended the period for the reversal of proof to more years than what is actually written on the EU directive. So yes, there are certain policies at the EU and also the US. I couldn't give you an example from the US, unfortunately, but in the EU there are several policies or legislations that goes into incentivizing or helping these soft policies.
Okay, thank you, Fernanda. I think this was the last question we have here today. Just I would like to add to the point of activities in countries that we, UNEP, intend to keep working on around product lifetime extension. We are planning to keep the working group around product lifetime extension alive and operating within the Consumer Information Program, the One Planet Consumer Information Program. We are also planning to roll out this training in countries. So if you know of any opportunities that we could join forces to deliver this training in countries, please let us know. It would be very good. The third thing is that we also are also interested in keep collecting case studies from developing countries especially. So if you are aware of any interesting business models that are being developed in your countries, please let us know, and we will be happy to try and compile new case studies to keep illustrating these strategies around product lifetime extension. I was just told that there is one more question. So, Bettina, can you help me here?
Sure, pleasure. So there was one more question, which is around product design. So the person asks if there are any collaborations with design schools to innovate in terms of product design, so that a company, for example, builds a modular product using materials that can be remanufactured at end of life.
Well, yes, I can't really think of a concrete example to give in this case, but certainly I think there is this type of collaboration with the designers. It's a very good idea, actually, this model that this person describes. Yes, but I can't really think of a concrete example where this happens in practice, just to illustrate. But this is a very, very good example of how this could be, one idea of how this could be put in practice, actually.
Maybe also if I could add there, I don't know if the question came from Patrick, if you're aware of the conference that's called Product Lifetimes and the Environment Plate, which brings together academia that works on product lifetimes. And I attended once, and it was very much around this topic also of product design. So perhaps you can look into that and find some interesting initiatives there.
Great. Thank you, Bettina.
So now I think we don't have any more questions. So we still have time to show our video in the remaining 2 minutes. So let's do that. Yeah, it seems that we are having some difficulties. So Bettina just pasted the link to the video in the chat box. So please go ahead and log into YouTube and please watch the video. The video was made aiming to the general public, the youth. So it brings the message in a very clear and very usual way, nothing very technical. We have the video in English and with subtitles in Spanish and Portuguese so far. The video was also developed with the support from the French Ministry of Ecological and Solidarity Transition. And it's an output of the Consumer Information Program of the One Planet Network. I would like to thank you all very much for staying with us, for participating in this training, to thank Fernanda for delivering it. And if you have any questions, any other questions, any suggestions, any case studies that we could develop, please feel free to contact me or Bettina or Fernanda, and we would be happy to work together with you. So have a nice afternoon, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.